Now then, this is not an advertisement for 3-in-1 oil, but I just came out of my workshop to put a dab of oil on the micrometer mechanism of my sextant, and it occurred to me, you know, that I get all sorts of queries these days about sextants coming in on the internet. People particularly want to know what to look for when they're buying a sextant, and I thought I'd make a little video about that might be helpful to all sorts of people. So here we go. First I'd better set my stall out. As you see, I'm a oldish sort of chap these days. I can't get away from it. That's how it is. Time marches on. But that gives me a huge advantage when it comes to astronavigation, because I started navigating on the oceans in the very early 1970s, and there was no option. You had to do it was astro or nothing. That was it. And my first astro course I went on was in the Merchant Navy College in Southampton, and it was tortuous. It was all full of spherical trigonometry and difficult mathematics, and they didn't mention the sextant at all, which to me was the exciting thing. That was what it was all about. So I gave that up in the end and became self-taught. And then I was finally, the rough edges, if you like, were knocked off when I did a yacht delivery with my father-in-law, who was an ex-World War II fighter pilot, actually. He was a Spitfire pilot, but he'd gone on to fly other things. And he used to navigate aircraft across the Atlantic with this, and this is a bubble sextant. Now, to be honest, I've never fully understood this. He did show me how it worked about 30 years ago, but I've forgotten it. It's beyond me, but I've kept it in honour of his memory, because he was a great guy. When we went on the delivery, I had my own sextant, and he was pretty impressed by that. This one's mine. So he went out and he bought himself this little chap, which is a yachting sextant. It's pretty much the same as mine. There are some differences which we'll explore later, but for now we'll put it back in its box, because I'm setting my stall out, aren't I? So I learnt to navigate in those early days doing deliveries and things, and then when I finally went off with my wife in 1975 in our little boat to South America, I realised that this was it for real. It was either really going to work or it wasn't, and you know, it did. And it was the most wonderful experience to come in out of the ocean, having been at sea for 30 days, and to see a new continent with people speaking different tongues come out of the horizon, and the lighthouse was right where I said it would be. What a job satisfaction that was, compared with pushing a button on a GPS. Anyway, now we've got the GPS and we can't get away from it, so that's the way of it. But I did for 25 years navigate by no other means than the stars and the sun. So I do know how to do it. I went on to write the course for the National Sailing School for England in, when would that be, about 1980. And subsequent to that, I wrote my little textbook, Celestial Navigation, which has sold in tens of thousands all over the planet. And the reason why it sells so well is quite simple. I'm not very good at maths. As I said, I bailed out of the Merchant Navy course. It was just too hard. I had to have 2 goes at the mathematics exam we needed to get into university. I wasn't studying maths or physics or anything at university, but you had to have a maths course. And I didn't get it first time. So that's where I am with figures. So if you're not great with figures, don't let it put you off. Just don't. It's not difficult. There's nothing in astronavigation that if you're properly trained, a bright lad of 10 couldn't deal with. So there you are. Now then, what are we going to look for when we look for a sextant? Okay, let's start by thinking about how it actually works. When we look through the telescope at a heavenly body, duly shaded if it's the sun, to make sure it doesn't burn our eyes out, the light comes straight down onto this mirror here. It's deflected from that mirror onto this mirror, which is called the horizon mirror, and from there it's deflected through the telescope to my eye. And the angle, the top mirror, the index mirror, is making with the horizon is the angle which is measured by the sextant. Now, in order to be able to see the horizon and the reflected image of the heavenly body properly, the horizon mirror is cut in half, and half of it is see-through. It's just like glass in your window, and the other half is silvered, and it's got mercury on the back, and so it reflects. So when you look at the heavenly body, the sun or the star, whatever it is, you are actually sort of looking at it just on the cusp of those two, of that interface between the mirror and the glass. It sounds complicated, but actually it's dead easy when you're doing it in practice. And because it sounds complicated, there's been a tendency in recent years for sextant manufacturers to do some magical thing. I don't know what it is they do with the horizon mirror, so that you no longer have this split mirror. You just look through it and you see the sun sitting on the horizon, which is, on the face of it, serious progress. Sounds great, doesn't it? But actually, there was no problem at all with the old system. I don't know what that's all about, really. And the other thing is this, that I don't know whether this is true or not. It's anecdotal, but I have heard that the single view of the horizon actually gobbles up a certain amount of light, which won't matter at all if you're shooting the sun, because there's light and to spare there. But if you're shooting a dim star, it could cause you problems. And I love to shoot stars. So, you know, I would stick with the old system if I were you. Go for a split mirror. You can't go wrong. So you'll see from that that optics are very, very important, the quality of the optics, which brings us to the first question. When you're looking for sextants and you dial up on the internet and you see what's available, you see all these plastic sextants that people are now making. And there are also the old-fashioned metal ones, and some of them are very new-fashioned too, and are very, very handsome modern instruments. And there are still some made like my good old Hewson here from, well, we'll talk about that in a minute. But do you buy plastic or do you buy metal? Well, it really depends on what you want to do, as in so many things. Modern plastic sextants, I'm not talking about the El Cheapo ones, which are absolute rubbish. They always were and they still are. They've got a big flat back plate and they're absolutely terrible. Don't have anything to do with those. They're a waste of space. The good plastic ones are actually rather fine instruments these days. I've used them and I've been very impressed by them. And if you want a sextant as backup for GPS, and all your ambitions are centred around shooting the sun in decent weather when everything's going for you and you really need it, well, go for a plastic one. It'll cost you, I don't know, £250, what's that, $350. You get a good instrument and it will certainly do the job. And if you damage it and drop it over the side or brain the mate with it or something, it's not the end of the world. However, if you want to shoot stars, the optics on those instruments are very often not quite as good as the ones on the really good quality metal ones. And for double that money, £600 or £700, you're looking at buying a metal instrument with top quality optics, really good crisp things that you can see the stars jumping out of the sky at you. These things are really special. And if you're buying a sextant that you want to keep for life, and that's what we do, isn't it, us seafaring people? It's an instrument that it almost speaks about us. My sextant here was given to me by the principal of the first sailing school I ever worked for when I went off to South America. Back in, goodness knows, 40, 50 years ago. And he said, look, this was my dad's in World War II. I've no further use for it. You better have it. It'll be good for you, and it has been. And every time I pick it up, I honour his memory, and particularly that of his old dad, because when you open the box, you'll see that this instrument was made in the early 1940s. It was used in World War II, and I understand it went round the North Cape on the Russian convoys. So it's got some real history. I love that instrument. The optics are good. It's still good after all these years. How old is it now? 80 years old, and it's still doing a great job. So that's my sextant, and I love it. The modern ones, the optics are even better. They don't look so pretty, and they haven't got the history, but they work well. Now, here's something. You'll see that this one of mine has got a light on it for reading the micrometer when it's dim and you're taking stars. There's a battery pack that goes in the handle, and it's all very sophisticated. There's even some proper old 1940s wire here, which has shot its bolt, and quite frankly, I don't care, because in all the years I've had it, I've never used that light. It used to work when I first got it, but I've never used it, because if I need to read it when I'm writing down the readings for star sites, I nip down below when I've taken a star, jot down the numbers, pop back up and take the next one. because we're short-handed. We're not on a bridge full of merchant navy officers and you say, write down the numbers. That's not going to happen. You do it yourself. So I wouldn't worry if it's got a light or not. I should forget about that. Now, what's the next thing? Size. You might say size matters. We've got my father-in-law's old yachtsman sextant here, which is worth a look. It's a tiny little instrument compared with mine. Let me put one in each hand so you can really compare them. Notice how I'm picking it up like that, never using the quadrant, and the same with this one. So if we look at them, you can see that there's a big difference in size, and actually that doesn't really matter. I've found that this one works very well, but it's not quite so sophisticated. It hasn't got so many shades on it. There's only 2 shades for each mirror, and very often that's just not enough. The big one, the old one, has got 3 shades on each mirror, so using those 3 you can get a combination of shading for any conditions of light at all. And using the thinnest shades, which may not be present on something with only 2, I'm able to literally pull the sun out of the clouds sometimes. You can't hardly see it, and with the sextant, with that one magic shade on, pop, there it is. So you want to look at the shades as well. Make sure there are enough shades. Don't be put off if it's quite small. This one is, as I say, it's got a very tiny little thing, really. And there's a lot to be said for that, because if you're carrying it around from boat to boat, the box is quite small. And, well, there you are. Don't be put off if it's small, but make sure it's good quality, and do look at those optics. You see the optics on here. This telescope is not nearly as good as that one on the old Hewson. So, size. Next thing is, how easy is it to read? Now we're going to have a look at this one with a close-up camera, and we'll see that when I wind the micrometer, we'll put it on the box so I can take one hand to it. When I wind the micrometer, it's beautiful. There's a little vernier here to read the micrometer, but unfortunately the vernier is measured in seconds of arc. There are 60 seconds to a minute, and a minute of arc, of course, is quite a small measurement. It's 1 mile at the equator. So we're looking at 60ths of a mile here. Well, that's a bit ridiculous in terms of practical astronavigation. Also, nobody uses seconds anymore. People use decimals of a minute, and a decimal of a minute is 200 yards, or 187 metres if you're of that persuasion. So what you do, you simply wind the micrometer until you've got the heavenly body where you want it, and you read the first graduation, and that shows you literally by inspection how many decimal points it is. What's that one? I don't know, 0.4 or something like that, and that's really good enough, because nobody, not the greatest astronavigator in the world, is going to tell you he can get to within 200 yards on the planet. So that's good enough. But you want something that's easy to use, that moves smoothly. Mine does. Now I've just given it a dab of oil, and that it's easy to read. Same goes for the actual quadrant. That must be easy to read as well, because it's very easy to misread that. Mine is not great. It's got a nice arrow engraved here which shows you what's what, and as you move it around and then click it into place, that will show you which is which. But it's quite, there it goes, look. See, it's easy to make a mistake with that, so take some care. Funnily enough, the last thing you want to look for, and it's important, is the box. Now, we're not talking here about the quality of the dovetailing on the lovely mahogany box like I've got here. Modern ones are generally plywood and they're nothing special. It's the design of the box that counts. And what I'm going to show you here is that when my sextant goes into the box, it sits in a box on its special little place, and whatever I have set it to when I shot the sun or the last star, it stays there, and I don't have to fiddle about with it to get it into the box. Look, it'll go all this way, which means after I've, for example, shot the sun, I come down below, I put the sextant back in its box, fine, and having done that, I set up my paperwork and I start doing my sums, and then I plot my position. And if I find when I plot my position line it's just not good enough, there's something badly wrong with it, it's 60 miles adrift. What's that about? It's 60 miles away from the dead reckoning position. Can't be right. Or can it? I don't know. Well, what are you going to do? The first thing you do is you go and have a look at the sextant and see what angle you measured and see if you've got it right. Because as I just explained, it's very easy to misread the actual number of degrees. I've done it countless times and had to go back. You find that you've done it wrong. 60, you're a degree out, that's 60 miles, bingo, problem solved. If your sextant is like the little one here, it won't go into the box unless it's in a particular position. So don't buy that one. I mean, that was all right. It cost my father-in-law next to nothing, and he was well pleased with it, and it's all right. Taken on balance, you can live with that. But it's so much better if you're buying one for real and buying it for new, to make sure that the guy who built the box knew what he was about. So make sure it goes back in and you can read it. And really, that's about it. I'm just going to finish up by showing you a star sight plot that I took, I don't know, when was it? I was bound from Anguilla in the West Indies. I was bound for Horta in the Azores. I had no engine at that time, and we were nearly at the Azores. I think we were 17 days of Anguilla, out of Anguilla. We made a fast passage. We did it in 19 days with no engine in a gaff cutter, which wasn't bad. And I'll just show you this star sight plot because it is a thing of beauty. The thickness of the pencil line defines the accuracy of the fix. There are, I don't know how many stars, I think there are 7, and they all cross right on top of each other, all except for one, which I shrewdly discarded because I'd probably seen the wrong star. And that is the wonder of astronavigation. But it all starts with a decent sextant. So treat yourself, go out and buy a nice one, and be happy, and then leave it to your grandchildren when you go.